right, let's review for the Unit 4 test. All right, so here's your review topics. All right, you can pause that. Okay, so first topic is market revolution. Now, the market revolution it is like the increasing economy to a market economy, right? We're selling a lot of goods. We've got industrialization and factories in. So this is that kind of increase in having those, marketplace goods. And one thing that helps the market revolution happen is going to be the transportation revolution. So adding the roads and canals, and then a few years later, railroads. And that way you can ship goods, very quickly and cheaply across the country, right, and make those goods more available. Now, the other thing with the transportation revolution is that most of the roads, canals, and railroads are built in the north and the west. And so there was a big push to link the north and the west. Well, settlers are moving out west. Today, we'd probably call it, the Midwest area. And so they're moving out west, so easy access to get there, but then to send their farm goods back and to get northeastern manufactured products west, right, at a cheaper rate. Now, the South will definitely have some roads and, some few canals and some railroads later on, but definitely not as much as the North and the West. Okay, this is going to lead to regional economic specialization. So each part of the country is specialized in, different economy, right? So the North will be manufacturing and industry, right? The growth of factories. The West will be grains and farming and, food crops, but without the use of slavery. And they're mainly feeding themselves as well as the Northeasterners who are, busy working in the factories. And then the South, of course, this is our era of king cotton, right? They're mostly going to be growing cotton, also some rice and some sugar and a little bit of tobacco, but mostly cotton. With your regional economic specialization, you get regional interests, and each part of the country is going to fight for certain things that that they value and want, and is crucial to how they're doing things. So the North wants the tariff, right? The tariff is a tax on imports. So if you put a tax on imports, then you're making those manufactured goods cost more, so people buy the American-made cheaper products, right? And so the North is making these products, so it definitely benefits them to have a tariff. Now, Northerners also tended to want the bank. So remember the bank war with Andrew Jackson, right? They're the ones manufacturing. They want control of that money supply. There's a lot of bankers up there to begin with, and financiers, and they kind of want things centralized, right? And so they're going to be for the bank, whereas Southerners are kind of skeptical of it. Okay, the West. The big regional thing that they want is internal improvements, meaning the roads, canals, and then, of course, later on the railroads. And so those are things that they're going to fight for. And that's something that, the South doesn't really put a lot of attention into. Okay, well, what's the big thing that the South wants? Slavery, right? Okay, but we'll come back to that. Industrialization. So, of course, factories, right? We're getting lots of factories. The North is going to be growing. They're going to be manufacturing a lot of goods. Cities are growing. You've got urbanization. Cities going up very quickly. They can't quite keep up with housing and sewer and, city services, but they're giving it a shot. This will also bring immigration, which we'll talk about in a second. And then, so one of the unique factories that we get, now the factories, it's long days, right? 12 to 14 hour days, low pay, right? It's unskilled workers. We've talked about an unskilled worker is someone who screws the cap on the tube of toothpaste, right? Whereas a skilled worker might be an electrician or a plumber. And so with that, there's this new factory system called the Lowell system. What's unique about the Lowell system is they decided to hire young women. Well, why hire women? You can pay them less, right? They'll take a lower paycheck. And so they really want to maximize profit, right? And so they're going to go ahead and hire young women. Now, these factories were located slightly outside of town, but they would be, fairly safe place to have your young girls. They lived in dorms. There's going to be, head mistresses to look out for them. They were required to go to church on Sundays, and so had a lot of supervision to make sure, nothing bad happened to them. Okay, and hopefully, they would work here for a little while, and then once they got a little bit older and found a husband, they could get married. I'm not sure how you find a husband when you're working a 14-hour day, but I'm sure they gave it a try. Okay, let's see. All right, so industrialization also brings Irish immigration in general. And so your Irish are one of the first big groups to immigrate to the United States. So this is our 1840s time frame, right? We're in the antebellum time frame. And the Irish tended to settle in your cities. So New York, Boston, Philadelphia, cities on the East Coast. Now, your Irish were too poor to move west, right? They're suffering from that potato famine, and so they come with no money, and so they'll be stuck in those factory jobs. And since the factory jobs are so low paying, most Irish never tend to earn enough money to, say, go out west and buy a farm. And so once you get a lot of Irish in town, by 1840s or 1850s, there was something like 200,000 Irish in New York City alone. Those Americans get annoyed with them, right? They're bringing down the neighborhood. And so they're Catholic, right? They kind of stick together, send their kids to Catholic schools. They'll take any job at any low pay. And so we'll see, some discrimination against the Irish. So things like no Irish need apply. Okay, the Germans are tolerated a little bit better because they tended to have some money. They tended to be a little more educated, a little more literate, and so they tended to move out west if they could. You'll still have a pretty good number in the cities, but they might move out west and form communities like Fredericksburg and New Braunfels, and they would, kind of stick to themselves, so they were tolerated a bit better. Okay, what are the push factors pushing immigrants out of Europe? Well, the Irish potato famine, basically economic devastation will push the Irish out. And then Germany's got some political instability with its rulers, and then a poor economy. And so they will, be kind of pushed to live somewhere else. And then the pull factors, of course, are going to be factories. Not factories, but the jobs, right? Factory jobs. And then, of course, land, right? So we're pulling them with economic opportunity. Now, one of the downfalls of immigration is nativism. And so this is our, hatred or fear of and discrimination against immigrants. And so you'll see that there's a political party that starts up called the Know Nothing Party. That's anti-immigration. No Irish need apply, right? They wouldn't hire Irish. And you can see this political cartoon. You've got the Irish barrel of whiskey and the German barrel of lager beer, and they're running off with this ballot box, right? And so they're trying to say, the Irish and the immigrants, they're voting for the Democrats, right? And they're kind of stealing the polls, right? But it's their right to vote, and a lot more often the Democratic Party would kind of court the vote of immigrants, right? They'd offer them a job, a place to live. All you have to do is, vote for that person in return. Okay, the corrupt bargain. So we're moving into that era of Andrew Jackson. So the corrupt bargain is where in 1824, no one has a majority of electoral college votes, right? The 3 or 4 candidates for president. We've got John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson in the middle there, and then Henry Clay. No one gets a majority. So what happens then, the House of Representatives gets to decide. And perhaps a logical thing would be to pick Andrew Jackson because he has the most popular votes. But John Quincy Adams is like, hey, Henry Clay, look, if I'm president, I'll appoint you Secretary of State. Would you be okay with that? And Henry Clay's like, well, yeah, sure. Almost every Secretary of State has become president next. So yeah, I can wait. And so they go convince the House of Representatives to do that when they're not supposed to talk to them. Okay, so Andrew Jackson's definitely upset about that. So main things to know about Andrew Jackson, he ushers in the era of the common man. He is kind of our first common man president. And so how do we get this era of the common man? It's universal white male suffrage. All white men can vote. They've ended that property qualification for voting. And so now the candidates have to do this popular campaigning. They've got to have the parades and the barbecues and posters and go out and get these kind of average people to vote. And they do vote, right? And they vote for Andrew Jackson. One of the big draws to Andrew Jackson is that he's a war hero, right? From the Battle of New Orleans of War of 1812. So they really like him. Okay, so some big issues with Andrew Jackson are Indian removal, right? And of course, we're doing a big project on that, so I won't go into too much detail on that. But basically, they want to remove the Indians to get their land, right? Same old story, different time frame. Nullification. So nullification is when Congress passed the tariff of abominations, right? In South Carolina, said it was so high, it's abominable, right? In South Carolina, passes a nullification act, right? They're going to nullify the tariff. They're not going to collect it. They're saying it's bad. We don't have to collect it. And now they don't have that power, right? You can't deny federal laws. You can't just not follow federal laws, but they're going to force this. So nullification is really a states' rights issue. So the states, once again, trying to force their will over the federal government. So this is a long battle. Remember, the Articles of Confederation was states' rights, and then when we're trying to get the Constitution, which puts the power in the federal government, there's many arguments back and forth where the states are trying to assert their rights. So anything from different things from the bank to the different John Marshall court cases, right? So again, this is the states trying to assert their power over the federal government. Okay. All right, so also under Andrew Jackson would be the failed annexation of Texas. So Jackson, Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, none of those presidents want to annex Texas. Why not? Well, they fear it will cause controversy over slavery. The threat of war with Mexico is not quite that big of a problem. James K. Polk will go ahead and address that, but their immediate concern is slavery. Okay, log cabin and hard cider campaign. So this is part of that common man campaign, right, where your presidents from Martin Van Buren to John Tyler will, portray themselves outside of the log cabin saying, look, I grew up in a log cabin just like you did. We made hard cider and drank it just like you guys. And so that's, that's their portrayal there. Okay, so the Second Great Awakening is going to be a religious revival, but it's also going to start off the antebellum reform movements, right? And so we've got abolition, women's rights, temperance, prison and mental health reform, and education reform. So women's rights, the big right that women want is the right to vote, right, or suffrage. And you might even see the terminology franchise. If I'm fighting for the franchise, I'm fighting for the right to vote. Okay, their big convention is the Seneca Falls Convention, where they will write the Declaration of Sentiments, which basically lists all the reasons why women should have the right to vote. Now, is this a failure? Is this a success? Married women get some property rights in a few states. They don't get the right to vote until after World War I. But, it's an ongoing battle, so eventually they win. The big thing women are rejecting is that cult of domesticity, right? That women are confined to the home and being homemakers. Okay, so abolition, we know, is emancipation of slaves, right? We've got quite a few abolitionists here, so you might have some passages from them. The American Colonization Society, remember that was the plan to send free blacks back to Africa. And then, of course, Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, is one of the books that really reveals a lot of the horrors of slavery. Okay, King Cotton is basically cotton is spreading throughout the South. It's going kind of southwesterly, and of course, as cotton grows, so does slavery, right? And this is the South's way of life. Now, one thing to know is we're changing our justification of slavery from it's a necessary evil to it's a positive good, that slaves are being taken well care of, right? And one of the biggest things that shows us that it's not a positive good is going to be the slave rebellions, right? And the slave uprisings and how slaves will resist this. Okay, so I hope this review has helped you. That's the gist of